Hi everyone, my name is Cassie and I'm a community manager over on the Google advertiser community. I work specifically with advertisers on AdWords, and today I'm joined by our special guest. He's one of our top contributors, Jack Porter-Smith. Jack has been a top contributor with us for a really long time. I'll let him speak a little bit more about himself in a moment, but today we're going to be talking about ways that you can set up yourself for success with AdWords, especially if you're really new to online advertising and to AdWords in particular. So if you've ever been unsure about how to get started, what you need to get in place before you actually enable a campaign, and what are the things that you need to consider before actually deciding to make that jump, then this is for you. And I just want to remind everyone that this is a live event. We're doing this right now. So if you have questions, I encourage you to go to the AdWords community on the event page here where you should be watching this video. And if you scroll down below, you should be able to post your comment and you can post your question there. So we'll be looking at those questions throughout this time here. We'll be responding on air. And then if you have questions as follow-ups as well, we will come back and answer those at a later date. So Jack, I'll turn it over to you. Can you share a little bit more about yourself, about what your experience is like with AdWords, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cassie. So hello, everybody. Welcome. As Cassie mentioned, I've been a TC on the AdWords side for 7 or 8 years, I think.
Yeah, long time.
long enough. And in the last 3 years, I've been running a pay-per-click team or company effectively. So more agency side experience than client side. So, over that time, I've learned a lot and continue to learn a lot. So the idea of being here today is really just to impart the experience I've gained through working with hundreds of clients over the year, obviously learning from their challenges and mistakes and also the good things they've done. So hopefully I can help you guys start your AdWords efforts or continue your AdWords efforts on the right track.
Awesome. So I know we have a lot of different things to talk about today. I think, so from my time working with customers, one of the things that I have found is most crucial for them is to actually figure out, okay, why do they want to start an AdWords campaign and what is going to be the point of that? Sometimes people, will start their campaigns without defining that, and that can make it a lot more difficult to be successful. So I wonder if you've seen that as well, and how you would recommend that people start defining what they want to do with their campaign.
Yeah, it's a big topic with regards to setting, goals and objectives. And I think the old adage goes, that half of your marketing budget is working, but you don't know what half. In that typically and traditionally, even not that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, almost every business on the planet will have a marketing budget and they will be spending X amount of dollars and pounds and euros every month without necessarily knowing what exactly they're getting back from that, and therefore how to refine the campaign and how to develop that focus. So really one of the first things that we like to do, and I'd recommend everyone does, when deciding, okay, am I going to start an AdWords campaign? What type of campaign is it going to be? How long am I going to run it for? How much am I going to spend, critically, is to really just bring it back and decide, what do I need out of this? I'm not just doing it because I have a marketing budget to spend and it seems like what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
So much more from the perspective of, well, okay, how much are you planning to spend and exactly what do you need or want to get back? And that's really where it comes down to doing the best job possible of setting your goals and objectives. Now, obviously, every business is different. Maybe you want online sales, maybe you want online leads for offline sales, or maybe even brand awareness or something in between. But as long as you have a clear idea of what that is, then you can move forwards. And also critically, once you've launched, you have something to benchmark your results against. Instead of just launching with no real idea, and then after 30 days, that becomes your benchmark. That's not the right way to do it. So you should always have a clear goal in mind. Maybe it's you need to get 10 phone calls a month. Maybe it's you need 100 sales on your e-commerce site. Whatever it might be, just make sure you have a crystal clear objective so that 30 days after you've launched, you can actually, with a good degree of value, measure that, compare it to what you needed to get, and then decide if the campaign is profitable for you or what you need to do to keep it going thereafter.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what I'd add to is like, yeah, asking, okay, what is the goal of your campaign? It's not a trick question. And I think the obvious answer that people come to at first sometimes is just, well, I want clicks. I want people to get to my website. But it's sort of like, obviously you want people to get to the website, but what is it that you want them to do once they're there? Like what is most important to your business? So
that's right. Yeah. And to be honest, it's probably the thing that gets done the least. So, I know it's tempting just to dive in and get started, but if you do just take that time to focus on it, it'll set you up for much longer term success.
Yeah, totally agree. And so I guess going back to like that idea of, we want clicks, right? That's primarily what AdWords does, brings people to your website. So then how important, I guess in your experience, is it to have a particular website experience? Like if I'm just starting out and, I want to, get sales or I want to get phone calls, no matter what my goal is, how important is it for me to actually then focus on the website as well? Or should I be focusing more on, building my campaign or what does that balance look like?
Yeah. So really the goals that you set will define the type of campaign that you're going to run, right? First and foremost, that's what you have to have a crystal clear idea of. I think everyone knows AdWords as the platform where you bid for keywords on search and present text ads and take them through to your website. But, the truth is that is changing enormously. Search is still a huge part of AdWords, but it really is quite a small piece of the pie now in today's world, as Google is releasing both new campaign types and ad formats. And one of the differences that brings is quite a lot of campaigns these days, the primary objective of them is not to get them to your website. Okay, so when you think about call-only campaigns on search, okay, there is no website involved whatsoever. Okay, it's mobile users only. You're still bidding on keywords and presenting ads, but there's no website involved in the equation. So, if you are a small local business, maybe a plumber or an electrician or something like that, where all you care about is getting phone calls, you have to consider that, before you go and invest thousands of dollars or pounds in a all singing and dancing website, do you even need one, right? Would be the first question. Same thing would apply to video campaigns on YouTube and so forth. However, if we assume that you do go down the route of setting a goal which relates to using a website via any of the ad campaign types, it is critically important to make sure your site is in good condition to receive it. The absolute no-brainer naturally is your site has to be responsive on all devices and browsers, mobile, tablet, laptops, desktops. And I think that's a mistake I've seen quite a lot over the years, is a lot of design is still desktop first, whereas the way I think, and I think everyone should think, is mobile first. And as desktop traffic diminishes. So that's absolutely critical, because again, not a lot of people necessarily pay attention to it, but in AdWords, you can of course segment performance for each campaign by device. So you can see the click-through rates, conversion rates, bounce rates, and so forth between people on different, whether it's a phone or a laptop. And very often still, I see a lot of accounts that have fantastic PPC metrics. So they have good cost per click, good click-through rate, good quality score, and all these things. But the conversion rate on mobile will be dreadful compared to desktop, leaving a lot of money on the table just because the site isn't mobile optimized. That's kind of a broken record at this point, but the fact is I still see that almost every week. So that's extremely important. So if you assume that your site is geared to all devices and there's no major issues in that regard, then you do also want to spend some time thinking about the best conversion experience for your visitors. Now that can mean 100 different things. There's no one answer I can give today on what makes a good conversion experience. But generally speaking, you want to make sure your website is up to date, it's responsive, it has all the critical conversion components on it. So most people these days would expect a phone number prominently, a contact form that isn't complicated to fill out, and most people would even want live chat. So as a starting point, you need to ask yourself, does your website contain all of these features very prominently throughout the website, and especially on the landing page that you drop people on? And then as it relates to landing pages as well, I mean, one of the biggest sins, so to speak, is sending traffic to a homepage. So unless it's a branded campaign. So, you know, sometimes it's unavoidable, but generally speaking, every AdWords account should be divided into topics and themes. And then each of those topics and themes should have landing pages specific to that. So whatever your keywords are, you need to absolutely make sure they're very relevant to your landing page for a number of reasons. So this, again, is a very fundamental thing, but it's something that you have to get in order before you even touch AdWords to give yourself the best results.
Yeah, okay. So I think lots of good stuff there. So I think the first point you had too about like, do you need a website? Or, you know, do you need to send, I guess, AdWords clicks to your website? That's a really good point. Because there are lots of other campaign types, like you said, call only campaigns. Like if you are just starting out and you don't have like the time or the resources to optimize your website for that experience, then you could just take that quick step. And especially if calls are your number one goal there. And so, and then I think the other thing that you said too is then, okay, the next step is if you are going to send people to your website, making sure that's friendly across all devices, quick path to conversion. So the way that we always sort of talk about that is like, if there are lots of steps in between when I get to your website and then when I actually do that thing that you're hoping that I do, then that's just more and more opportunities for me as your potential customer to like get confused or lazy or just not want to complete that process right now. I put it off for later and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's right. And if I maybe just clarify on the call only thing, what I meant by that is if your website sucks, like if it's a really poor site and you don't have the time nor resources to improve it, that's when a call only campaign is really handy, because you can still run a campaign. And I think the only reason you need a website is to verify your phone number for the call only campaign. So it basically saves you the step of redoing your site if it's not suitable for traffic, but you need to do AdWords ASAP to get leads, for example.
Yeah, and I think like, if you, but there is an opportunity cost there as well, right? So like, if your site's horrible, you can use a call only campaign, but if you have a decent site and there is valuable info on there that might make me choose you versus you know, your competitor, then that's something you want to consider as well. Like it might be worthwhile to actually send people to your website and just use the call extension instead. So okay, so I think that last question pulled up too, that there's, and we both know this, that there's tons and tons that goes into like starting and managing an AdWords campaign. You can start really basic, you can get very strategic and do more complex targeting and advanced features. If I am brand new to AdWords, how do I even decide where to begin? Like, can I do this myself? Should I be looking to hire someone or like talk to some experts? You know, where would I even begin?
So disclaimer, obviously I'm slightly biased towards agencies because I run an agency. However, you know, on a serious note, AdWords is one of these things that it has fantastic opportunity, but also fantastic risk if you don't know what you're doing. And at the end of the day, you are operating with hard cash very quickly. And, you know, one of my partners at WSI, he puts it brilliantly. He says, if you have to walk 500 miles, okay, so point A to point B is 500 miles. For whatever crazy reason, you have to make that trip. Now, you could walk and it'll take you a very long time, but you will get there. All right. Or if there's a helicopter there right next to you, you can try and fly it yourself, get there quicker, but you'll probably crash and die. So if you're going to take the helicopter, you need an experienced pilot with you. and you'll get there very quickly and successfully. If you're going to walk, that's absolutely fine, as long as you take one step at a time and make sure you're prepared for the trip. So I guess what that really means in practical terms is, if you want to do AdWords yourself as a business owner or someone who works within a business, that's absolutely fine. You can do it, but you have to be prepared for a long journey of learning and a fair degree of trial and error. You know, that's really what pay-per-click is. It's trial and error, even for the experts, because 9 times out of 10, if you're working on a campaign, whether you're client side or an agency dealing with a client, you haven't done that before for that exact situation.
Right. For
no matter if you, if you've built 1,000 accounts and run 1,000 pay-per-click campaigns, when a business comes to you, they are still unique. Their website is unique, their proposition, their pricing, their location, their target audience. There is no two similar, there are no two exactly the same pay-per-click campaigns. So every campaign will always have trial and error. That is the very nature of them. They are designed to be refined, because where you start is not going to be 100% ideal or optimized. So the question is, do you have the time, willingness, and energy to learn those things yourself? Or do you want to partner with an agency or an independent professional and have them pilot the helicopter for you, so to speak? For the argument, there's so many pros and cons. I think the real message is, if you're going to do it yourself, spend a lot of time preparing. There's lots of resources available from Google, obviously. The forum is a great place to ask questions and learn, but please don't launch the campaign and then start asking questions, because that's when you will literally burn your money. And then I think that's why the biggest pro for hiring a professional to do it for you is, even though they will cost you money, let's just, for a very basic example, let's say your budget is $1,000 a month, and your agency's average fee is 20%. So in that example, $800 will go to actual media on Google AdWords, and $200 you would pay to your professional or agency.
Right.
That $200 might seem like a big piece of the pie, right? And whether it's 100 or 300 doesn't really matter. But you have to ask yourself, can they make $800 work harder than you could make $1,000 work? Because they're not going to be making fundamental mistakes. You know, they will have advanced tracking. They will know what to avoid, what quick wins you can pick. And so then more often than not, those fees pay for themselves, because the media that you have spent is better spent. So there is no conclusive answer, but the message is, think about it long and hard.
Okay, we have a question on this topic from Scott. So he's asking, if you are trying to decide and you say, okay, I'm going to go with an agency or professional sort of account manager, what then should I be looking at as far as, you know, figuring out who to choose? And then, you know, once I choose a person, how do I make sure that they're doing a good job and it's working for my business?
Yeah, that is a hugely varied question that you could answer 100 different ways. But ultimately, for me, you do business with people. Okay. So, of course, you have to make sure that your partner or agency has the relevant qualifications and they are accredited Google partners and all the rest of it. You know, that's basic stuff.
Right.
If you have someone who's offering to run your pay-per-click campaigns, but they don't have the relevant personal and company qualifications, you probably want to stay away from them. But beyond that, it really comes down to a people business. You've got to put yourself out there, connect with various agencies. You probably don't want to go with the first one you speak to. And make sure they understand your business, okay? Because what you have to assume as a business owner who needs to do AdWords is that all of the potential agencies you speak to, they know what buttons to press. And it's not difficult, you know. So if they have the accreditations, you can assume they all know how to set up a campaign and how to optimize it. So the real question is, does the business owner of the agency, or does the account manager of the agency who you're going to be assigned to, do they get you and your business? Because if they don't, you'll be fighting an uphill battle from day one. And I have seen some examples of that where, you know, if you're a business owner of something fairly niche or fairly unusual, for example, someone who manufactures very specific products or does very, very niche services. You really have to make sure you can articulate your value propositions to your agency and that they understand them so that they can best represent you, in the advertising world. But like I said, ultimately it just comes down to relations. And if you can find an agency who you connect with, they're good at communication, they're responsive to your requests, then ultimately it just comes down to diving in and hoping for the best from your budget, and critically, if it doesn't work, learn something from it and pick a better one next time.
Yeah, all great points. I guess, so I think one of the other sort of like lingering questions that folks have, so we talked about, whether you should go it alone, so to speak, or hire a professional. Having a decent website, defining your goals. So these are, sort of all of those initial pieces you want to get in order before you even make that sure decision, right? Am I going to start a campaign? Let's say that I decided I am going to start a campaign, and either I'm doing it myself or I've hired someone to help me. What are the other things are there other things that I need to get in place before I actually set that campaign live? Especially in terms, I think of let's say my goal is phone calls. What does that even look like as far as getting that ready to go and making sure that I'm actually going to figure out, well, did I get more phone calls from this campaign?
Yeah, that's right, Cassie. I think once, like you said, once you've got your goals, your strategy, and your website's in good shape, and you've decided who's going to be creating your campaign, the very next thing you need to ensure is in place before you launch, not after, is that you do have a comprehensive and holistic measurement and analysis mechanism in place. That might sound like a lot of buzzwords, but what it essentially means is if you're spending $1,000 a month on pay-per-click, you need to know how many online orders you're getting back from that, or how many phone calls, or how many, whatever your conversion mechanism is. And that's where it does come down to making sure that pre-launch you have implemented and tested all of the appropriate tracking mechanisms to measure your campaign. So if we just go through them one by one, the first would be call tracking. So the last I heard from our Google rep, for especially local businesses, or really any business who does online leads for offline sales, which to be honest is most of them apart from e-commerce. So if you think about the local businesses who want to drive phone calls, basically that's what that means. There is no sense in spending thousands of dollars on AdWords if you don't know when your phone rings where it came from. So there are many call tracking solutions out there. Google's even having a crack at its own version in-house. Right now, I think there's probably more benefits to external ones. Sorry, Cassie.
It's okay.
Purely because they're more established, and this is a new thing for Google. So the great thing about external call tracking is, there's 100 different providers of it. It's very cost effective per month. It's a flat monthly fee generally. And all you have to do is generally implement a small piece of JavaScript on your website or landing page. And what that will do is when someone comes to your website from pay-per-click, it will show them a proxy phone number. So a fake phone number that redirects to your real phone number. And then you can record those calls and you can get all sorts of analytics on them, so that at the end of the month, you can look at your call report and you can say, okay, I spent $1,000 on pay-per-click. I got 10 phone calls, so that's $100 cost per call. Brilliant, that's good for me as a business. And furthermore, on the AdWords side, you can link in what keywords drove those calls, what ad copy drove the calls, and which landing pages drove the calls. So it gives your campaign manager a lot of information to optimize the campaigns on thereafter as well. So call tracking is extremely important. And I would like to clarify, the only reason, in my opinion, external call tracking is more useful at this point in time is generally because they allow recording. Whereas, so you can literally, as long as it's legal, you have to check with the state you're advertising in and all these things. But generally, if you can, as the campaign manager, actually listen to the phone calls that came in from pay-per-click, then you can say immediately, you know, because on paper, those 10 calls from $1,000 might look good. But if you then listen to them and the first 5 phone calls were people looking for jobs, then you know there's something wrong with your keywords. Maybe you need to add some negative keywords around people looking for jobs or what it might be. And that's the value of call tracking. So that's number 1. Number 2 is live chat. Live chat is something that more and more businesses are offering, because you can either manage it yourself or you can outsource it. And frankly, people like using it. You know, the uptake, the usage of it is rapid from what I'm seeing. You know, on some of the enterprise level accounts we manage, more than 50% of conversions or micro conversions are live chats now. And the rate of phone calls and form fills is diminishing. So people expect that immediate interaction with you, especially if they don't want to or they can't call you at that moment in time.
Right.
So again, if you're letting people interact with you that way, you have to be able to attribute it. So when you're looking at your live chat report, if you had 100 chats, it's good to know that, you know, 50 of them came from pay-per-click and the other 50 came from SEO or whatever it might be. And again, this is all trackable via Google AdWords code, and you know, very little manipulation of the JavaScript that allows live chat to function. So that would be number 2, track your calls and live chats. And the reason I put them first is because I would consider them as real-time interactions. I think getting form fills or contact form fills is great, but it's not real time. You know, you have to hope that by the time you get around to reading their message, you know, maybe it came in overnight or you're busy during the day, that when you reach out to them by email or phone call, that they still want you.
Yeah.
You know, for all you know, they could have done a search, found you, filled out a form, but then gone back to the search results and called somebody else because you weren't available at that moment in time, and you've lost the lead. So that's why I prioritize real-time conversions. But contact forms are still very important. So of course, if anyone does come to your website from pay-per-click and they submit their contact information, maybe they're requesting a quote or scheduling an appointment, again, just by simply putting the AdWords tracking code on your form thank you page or form completion page, that gives you the ability to attribute how many online conversions you're getting from there. And then finally, if you're an e-commerce store, it's absolutely critical that not only do you place the tracking code on your order success page so that you can see how many people from clicks progress to conversions, but also if you tweak the formatting of the conversion code, you can have it pull in the variables from the basket. So, you know, you can pull in the dollar value of the order, how many items were in the basket, etc., so that you can actually enable the return on investment column within AdWords. And then you can clearly see, as a retailer, I spent $1,000 on ads and I've pulled through $10,000 in sales, and then it's a no-brainer. You know, you have to continue. But what you will find within that at a more granular level is, you know, maybe some products are running at a loss. You know, if the thing sells for $100 and it costs you $150 in clicks to get the sale, you probably want to stop promoting that campaign and focus on other products and categories that are more profitable.
Right.
So sorting these things out before you launch the campaign is the only way that you can tie things back to the original goals and objectives that you set.
Yeah, so I think this is a great point too. That it's just like it can't, even though we defined that like very early on goal, right? Like let's say it was purchases, it can't just track purchases if there are these other ways for customers to get in touch with you. Because then we're not just getting the whole picture, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we have another question from Jeff. He says that AdWords is great because of all the data available for measurement and optimization, but it can be an overwhelming environment for people who aren't statisticians, engineers, or Excel experts. Any good tips for easing into the AdWords user interface? This is a bit of a doozy, I feel like, because just from my experience, I've worked with lots of customers as well, and have experience like leading them through the interface and walking them through like looking at their account. And I know that it can be challenging to sort of figure out where everything is at as well.
That's a good one, Jeff. I'll try.
Yeah.
I'll try not to speak for too long on this. So I have a very linear mind. Like, I think about things separately and I categorize them because it helps me to break it down. So if you have the same sort of mindset, Jeff, maybe this will help you. The very first thing I do with my AdWords columns or pay-per-click reports is I separate performance into two categories: pay-per-click performance and conversion performance. Because to my mind, they're entirely separate things. They are intrinsically linked, but for measurement and analysis, they are different things. So when I'm referencing pay-per-click performance, the first things that you need to make sure is that you have a healthy account, regardless of what the conversions are. So, what are your quality scores? What's your ad rank? Do you have healthy click-through rates? Is your cost per click higher than you wanted it to be, or is it acceptable? Are you getting enough impressions? So these are all things that I would sweep into the pay-per-click performance category. So when it comes to sort of looking at the columns that you've got set up in your pay-per-click reports, that really is only 3 or 4 columns. And as long as you know what to look out for, it's quite easy to digest and make sense of, right? So that's the first thing. As it relates to the conversion data, again, that's fairly simple as long as you've done step 1 that I talked about today, which is defining your goals and objectives. Because as a business owner or a campaign manager or someone running things internally, if you're looking at the conversion column and you've got 0 conversions, you have a clear problem. Equally, if you're looking at the cost per conversion column and you have some conversions, but the cost per conversion is too expensive, then again, without being an Excel wizard, you have a problem, right? So for me, that's a very simplistic way to separate these two things without worrying about the probably 20+ columns you could set in AdWords. So start with what you're comfortable with. And then, I think, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of it comes from experience. After a while, like I said, it's trial and error. You're never going to get it right on day 1. So as long as you know what to look out for, you'll get better as time goes on. But ultimately, if you don't feel equipped to analyze the data, either at a glance with the columns or in depth with Excel or whatever it might be, then that is where, until you feel comfortable with that, you should consult a professional or get some outside help. Mm-hmm. Right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and I think it's it goes back to like how much, and like we discussed, right, not just like resources as far as how much budget you have or how much knowledge, like how much time you have, right, to learn the interface. Because I think, it's one thing to like learn the concepts of online marketing if you're not familiar with it, but people forget that you also need to like learn the program as well and the platform.
That's right.
I think, if you do try to like if you're going to do it yourself and sort of manage your own campaign, the other thing I think is like, I think it's a great idea to not have all of the columns available. That's a really great point. Also, just like make use of the community in the help center, because most of the articles there already have like step-by-step tutorials. So rather than like logging into your account and trying to find your way around, you could start and say, okay, well, I want to look at my location targeting, find a resource about that, and it will lead you directly there as well. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of ways you can get help. And I think probably the final tip I could give on the way to not get overwhelmed is to make sure you're focusing on the right thing. Yeah. I've seen a lot of people freaking out because their click-through rate isn't what they expected it to be, whether it's high or low. Just I've had scenarios where people get really upset over that, or bounce rate as well. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter if the columns further to the right-hand side are good, right? Who cares if your click-through rate is 0.5%, if your conversion rate is 10%, right? Mm-hmm. So there are certain things that you have to learn to prioritize in your mind. What should I be worried about at this point, both in the campaign's progression and in my personal development, versus shouldn't I? Same for bounce rate. A lot of PPC campaigns these days, they will have a targeted individual landing page, right? And they have, like I said, so many conversion mechanisms these days. And there's 3 different ways at least that you could convert on one page. And that's just with macro conversions, never mind micro conversions. Yeah. So, the purpose of the campaign is to get people to bounce sometimes. If you want to bring people onto your page who have an immediate need for your service or product, and you present it to them in the right way and they convert, great. They're going to leave the page, they're going to bounce. So it's entirely possible that somebody gets to your site, they get your phone number, they leave within 15 seconds. If you're looking at your analytics, you might be freaking out thinking, oh my days, my AdWords account has a 85% bounce rate, that's terrible, which by industry averages, it would be. But you have to consider the bigger picture, and sometimes a high bounce rate isn't a bad thing. So I guess the point that I'm making to close off this question is segment what you choose to analyze and don't focus on individual metrics which don't really mean anything in isolation, like bounce rate or click-through rate.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, and so I think to, I guess, hit upon sort of like the last thing that we recommend as far as like setting yourself up for success. So let's say I'm an AdWords newbie. I've you know, have my campaign sort of all set up. You know, I have my holistic tracking. I know what I'm trying to do with this campaign. My website's looking great, and I've consulted a professional. If I don't have the time to do it myself, what should I do next? Like, how long should I let this thing run before I start optimizing?
Yeah, definitely. So this is an important topic, actually. And I think I just had another thought about the previous question with regards to doing it yourself versus hiring an outside agency. And I think the final decision on that comes down to value. You know, I think everyone, whether you're a business owner or an employee, you have to structure your day in how you can add the most value to your business. And that applies to every job in every business and every vertical. And if you are spending 2 hours a day tweaking your campaign and learning AdWords, could that be better spent? Could you be developing new relationships, opening new sales opportunities, improving your systems, you know, whatever it might be? And I think that's really what it comes down to. No matter how good you could be at PPC, if that's something you would pay someone $30 an hour to do, but you value your own time at $100 an hour, why are you doing that job? For me, that's what it comes down to in terms of value for time. So once you've got the campaign set up and launched, when should you expect results, and what sort of results should you expect? And this is very pertinent because, you know, on the forum and community, we do see, unfortunately, a lot of cases where, you know, businesses have activated a campaign but been dissatisfied with it. You know, this happens all the time. And the issue is, are you dissatisfied because it's not what you expected, or is it because you didn't, you know, take care of some of the things we talked about today? Ultimately, most campaigns will work out, okay? Unless there's something very unusual about your business, AdWords campaigns are on the whole profitable. Naturally, otherwise they wouldn't have a business there at Google. Now, the question is, how long should you give that to work? How long before you can conclusively say, AdWords is good for my business or it's not good? Please don't make these decisions after hours, days, or even weeks. Typically, especially in my experience in my business, we request everyone to give at least 60 to 90 days, all right? So 2 to 3 months. And that gives the campaign enough time to mature in its own way. It gives the campaign manager or whoever is running the campaign time to optimize it. And it also gives you some time to go through some seasonality, right? If you launch a campaign in December, I promise you it will behave very differently in March. So, and simply because AdWords campaigns, in my mind, like I said earlier, they are trial and error. So in the beginning, let's just use very simple numbers. If you get 10 clicks, 5 of them might not be that relevant to your business. Or they might not be from people on the best devices or from the best network or at the right time of day or the right day of the week. But you don't know that until you've gotten the traffic. Then after 30 days, you can begin to analyze that data and you can say, all right, I've been running my campaigns every day of the week, 24 hours a day. However, because I have comprehensive tracking in place, I can see that over the course of 4 weeks, my conversion rate on Wednesday has been 5%, whereas on Sunday it's been 2%. So if you're spending the same budget every day of the week evenly, and you understand this, naturally your cost per lead is significantly worse on a Sunday. So maybe step 2 for the second month is, okay, we're actually going to stop advertising on those days, and we're going to put more budget into Wednesdays, or whatever it might be, reducing your bids on the poor converting days. But the point is, you don't know that until you have a critical mass of data. The entire AdWords system is based on averages. That is absolute fact. Everything is an average. A click-through rate is an average. Cost per click is an average. Conversion rate is an average. And averages are based on hundreds, right? 1 out of 100 is a 1% conversion rate. If you have 3 clicks and you still have 1 conversion, you might think you have a 33% conversion rate, but you don't. It might be a fluke conversion from a very small pool of traffic. So you absolutely have to let your campaign build up a critical mass of data. That specific critical mass will again vary according to your budget and industry and business type. But the point is, over 60 to 90 days, you will have built up the critical mass of data. Your campaign manager will have had time to try different things. They will have been able to exclude the poor clicks. So the example I was giving earlier, if week 1, 5 clicks out of 10 are highly relevant and useful, by doing these optimization things that I'm talking about, by week 12, that might be up to 8 or 9 clicks out of 10 are adding value to your business. But if you pull out early, all you'll have really had is an expensive lesson and a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah. Okay, we have just one more question to sort of wrap things up.
Okay.
And sort of this is more just looking at the bigger picture. We talked a lot about the things that you can do early on to make sure that first campaign that you run is actually successful and meets your goals. Are there, I guess, missed opportunities that you see for beginners a lot of the time? Either things that they sort of miss out on because they don't realize that these options exist, or areas where they could actually get more value out of AdWords that they don't see?
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to, again, like I mentioned earlier, remembering AdWords is much more than search.
Yeah.
You have video, remarketing, display, all kinds of different combinations of these campaigns. Probably the biggest gap that I still see is a lack of remarketing. It's something that has actually been around for quite a long time now. I think 6 or 7 years on AdWords, but there's still a lot of businesses that don't do it. So they might have a search, display, or video campaign running, but they aren't accompanying it with a remarketing campaign. That's probably the most common missed opportunity that I see. And the value of remarketing is pretty simple. To me, it can add 30-40% value for only 5-10% of cost. So, you can imagine if you're a shop owner and 100 people walked into your store and they picked up your products, say you're a shoe store, right? They looked at various shoes, they tried them on, but 99 of them left without buying something. As a shop owner, you pretty much just have to say goodbye to them. But what if, as the shop owner, you could follow them around for the next 30 to 60 days? Every bus stop they walked past, they saw your poster. Every newspaper they picked up, it had your ad in it with a special offer enticing them back. Physical store owners don't get those opportunities, but online you do. And typically the cost per clicks on remarketing are significantly cheaper than search. And so that's why it can add a lot of value getting these people back for the second time onto your site, where they're more likely to convert because they're familiar with your brand. They've had time to think about your proposition. They've maybe checked with their wife if they're allowed to buy it, whatever it might be. So by that point, remarketing generally has very high conversion rates for very low cost. So if you're thinking about running AdWords, or you're currently running AdWords and you're not doing remarketing, unless you're in one of the banned industries like medical, I recommend you do that.
Yeah, great. So I think we're coming toward the end of our time here. If anyone has remaining questions, feel free to leave them on the event page on the community, and I'll be going back and looking and answering questions as they come up. Jack, thank you so much for doing this today and for sharing your tips with us. I think it's been really valuable to everyone who's been tuning in.
My pleasure. Thanks, Cassie. Thanks, guys, for the questions.
Yeah, of course. All right, we're going to tune out, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Bye. Cheers.